So essentially what St. Francis did is he had bought a coat of armor. He paid a lot of money for a coat of armor because he wanted to look smart in battle and be well protected. And he went off into battle against this other city. And he was basically overcome. He never got to walk into an actual battle. The others took control of him. They put him in a dungeon. They locked him away. And they sent his father a ransom note because they knew who he was and they knew his father had money. Well, he ended up being in this dungeon for about a year, which is a long time to sit and think, okay? And he thought about his life and the choices that he had made. Now, all accounts say that he never lost his happy attitude while he was locked away in this horrible place. After a year, he was ransomed. This experience, it didn't change his partying ways initially. He still wanted glory, and he never got as far away as one day's ride from Assisi. He wanted to be part of the Fourth Crusade, but it just didn't happen. And his father was so upset with him that he had spent all this money on armor. They had to pay money to get him out of this dungeon. And he had a dream in which God told him he had it all wrong and he had to return home. He had to go back to Assisi once he was released from the dungeon. Now, he was humiliated. People made fun of him. They called him a coward. His father was furious again about the money he wasted on the armor. His conversion did not happen overnight, though. It took some time. God had waited for 25 years, and now it was Francis's turn to wait for God. He started to spend time in prayer, and he went off to a cave, and he wept for his sins. Being imprisoned, it changed him, okay? Sometimes he felt overwhelmed by God's grace, and he felt God's joy when he spent time in prayer. His search for conversion led him to the ancient church of San Damiano. While he was praying there, he heard Christ on the crucifix speak to him, and the Lord told him, "Francis, repair my church." So that was a life-changing experience for Francis, okay? He looked for honor and glory in material things and in worldly things, and he found true joy and happiness in his search for the divine. Let's go ahead and take a look at another image. In this next image, this is called the death of St. Francis. And let me see if I can make this image a little bit larger so you can see it a little bit in better detail. This is in the Barty Chapel at Santa Croce in Florence, Italy. Now, it does have 19th century restorations on it, and this is one of the slides that is in your possible test slide, excuse me, in the study guide that you need to write facts about. So this was painted in 1320, and you can see the restorations here. And when they made restorations to the gaps in the painting where the fresco material, the plaster had come out, they did not paint over that. And the reason why is because it would not be the marks of the actual artist. So they're very thoughtful when they do restorations in Italy because, I mean, this was made in 1320 and we're in 2022. So this is 700 years old or more. So they're very thoughtful about how they restore frescoes in Italy. It's a much older country, obviously, than America. I had when I was in graduate school at OU, we had a woman from Italy came and she taught us a fresco restoration class, and she had us make a fresco, and then we had to damage it with a hammer, and then we had to repair it. So it was a really interesting experience. Okay, Giotto received the commission for the second surviving chapel in the Franciscan Church, of Santa Croce in Florence from a banker. The donor, whose last name was Barty, and his brother jointly inherited their father's banking house and commercial interests. This involved maintaining a good relationship with the powers who determined the politics of the day, with the Pope, with the ruling house of Anjou, and with the Guelph party. He was able to go on cultivating this highly effective mixture of faith, politics, and money for the next 30 years until his house went bankrupt in the 1340s. So the Barty family chapel is situated to the right of the choir of the church, which means that it is the first chapel of the southern transept and is dedicated to St. Francis. As was the case with the neighboring Peruzzi chapel, Peruzzi is another banking family in Florence, these frescoes were also painted over in the 18th century, but they were rediscovered in the 19th century and they were reworked. So when frescoes are reworked, oftentimes they have to take away the painting that someone painted over the original work. All right. During the restoration in the middle of the 20th century, all reworked areas were removed and ruined parts sealed with plaster. For this reason, some of the frescoes have empty spaces, as you see here. So that's because of restoration. That's a fact you can write in your study guide. Although the actual painting is considerably better preserved here than in the Peruzzi chapel, since Giotto went back to working with fresh plaster in this particular painting. Now, the Death of St. Francis is situated basically at eye level. When you come into the chapel, you can see this at eye level. You don't have to look up. It's not way high up on a wall. All right. In an extremely compressed state, I have to keep an eye on my clock so I don't go past the 15 minutes. St. Francis's disciples have gathered here for his funeral. One of them makes the saint's soul, or one of them notices basically that the saint's soul, you can see this image here, is being carried heavenward by angels. So here we have some angels and they're carrying St. Francis's soul to heaven. While one monk kisses the scars, here's a monk. There's several monks surrounding St. Francis. This one is probably kissing his scars. A disbelieving nobleman examines the wound in St. Francis's side. And so here you have this image. Let me go ahead and make it a little bit larger so you can see it a little bit better. Okay. Here's the monk kissing the hand of St. Francis. This is the monk that is looking at the wounds at his side. And then you can see here the restoration work that's been done later, much, much later after the mural was created. And banking families now, in this time period, in the 1300s, they have money, they're patrons, they have artwork made for various reasons, okay? Let's go ahead and look at another image. This is the Arena Chapel. This is a very famous mural, series of murals that Giotto painted. Okay, so this is kind of a neat story. Enrico Scrignevchi, the Scrignevchi family, he was anxious to save his soul. He was a member of the leading banking family of Padua, which was a university city just west of Venice. He came into an inheritance that was rich in money but poor in spiritual credit. and he decided to alter the balance. Enrico's father was known as the most notorious and flagrant of usurers. And a usurer is one who lends money at interest, especially at an exorbitant or unlawfully high rate. Quick cash payday loans, these little loan companies where you go get a loan and they hook you into crazy interest rates. Don't do that. When you get older, they'll rip you off, okay? They would be called usurers. Now, Enrico followed in his father's banking footsteps, but eventually grew worried that his activities would basically damn him forever into hell because they charged really high interest to people. So to atone for his sins, he constructed a chapel adjacent to the family palace dedicated to the Virgin of Charity. He hired Giotto to paint the interior with stories from the life of the Virgin of Christ, as well as a huge picture of the Last Judgment over the entrance wall. Enrico was in a hurry. The chapel was begun in 1302, and it was dedicated in 1305, so it was built in 3 years. Giotto's paintings, which cover interior walls of the building entirely, and you can see that here in this image. I'll go ahead and make it a little bit larger for you. And they go from the floor to the domed ceiling, tell the story of human redemption from the Annunciation of Christ's birth to the Virgin through the well-known events in the life of Christ, the Day of Judgment. The prevalent color throughout is an intense blue, as you can see. He likes to use blue as a background color, and it covers the ceilings and the walls. This color gives a strong sense of naturalism to the paintings and at the same time invokes the dome of heaven. Giotto's images are remarkable for their realism. So new, at the opening of the 14th century, the holy characters appear to be physical beings who inhabit and move through actual spaces. Okay? So this is in the Arena Chapel in Padua. Now, this is one of the frescoes on the Scrovegni Chapel wall, and this is the Massacre of the Innocents. Now, this is the biblical narrative story of basically genocide by Herod the Great, who was the Roman king that had been appointed by the Jews at the time of the biblical story, and infanticide. And basically, King Herod, when he heard that a new king had been born, the king of the Jews, when he heard that Jesus had been born, he ordered that all male children be killed in the land because he did not want this new king to usurp him and have power over him. This is obviously horrific that all these infant babies would be born. So you can see these images of men trying to take babies away from mothers and mothers fighting to protect their children. So that's what this particular mural is focused on. And unfortunately, there's a group of babies who have died in the bottom of the image. And these children were all in the vicinity of Bethlehem because it was foretold that this new king would be born in Bethlehem. Now, that had been announced by the three magi, the three kings that brought gifts to Christ. So the number of infants killed is not stated. However, the holy innocents, which is what they're called, have been claimed as the first Christian martyrs, the first souls that have died for Christ. This it just makes my chill bumps on my skin. This is one of the many images on the interior walls of the chapel. All right. Next, we're going to talk about another artist named Ambrosia Lorenzetti.